Hello and welcome to this video, and to one I mentioned a little while ago where I said I would talk about all the shows that I have seen this year. And by shows I mean like plays and musicals. I'm not adding in comedy to this. Now, I didn't actually think I'd seen that much this year, but it turns out I've seen 7 things. So I do have a notebook just with what they are and my sort of thoughts, so if I'm looking down or anything like that, that's what I'm looking at. And I thought I would just run through from my least favourite to my favourite of all the shows that I've seen and why and that kind of stuff. You probably will have seen most of these shows in videos throughout the year anyway, and I have a musical, or I have a theatre playlist, so I'll link that up here in case you want to know more detail than I'm going to give you in this video about some of the shows or past shows that I've seen, because this is the first time that I've actually done a run through of everything that I've seen in the year. So in at number 7, and my least favourite show of the year, although I did still enjoy it, and I did enjoy all of these, so let's just put that caveat in there to begin with, was Winnie the Pooh, the musical. I'm a big Disney fan, so that's why I wanted to see it, and I like Winnie the Pooh, and I think there's something very wholesome about Winnie the Pooh, something very sweet. I like the characters, so I was quite excited by it. Until I was buying the tickets, and it should have flagged in my brain at that point that the timings of the show is because it's not aimed at me. So the issue I had with Winnie the Pooh is that they obviously wanted it to be sort of like a child's first theatre experience, like they did 3 shows a day, it was a 1-act show that lasted just over an hour, etc, etc. But then they didn't actually keep the interest and engagement of the kids. So at least in the showing that I went to see, there was a lot of restless children, which does make it harder to enjoy a show. And that's possibly why it falls into my least favourite show of the year. Now, if I'd gone, say, with my soon-to-be child, so it was in a few years' time and I was taking her to her first theatre thing, maybe I would have had a different experience because I would have seen it through her eyes, etc, etc. And for the first 20 minutes, the kids were engaged, but then they'd seen the puppets, they've seen them plodding about. There wasn't lots of songs. Really the only one was Tigger's, and that did keep people entertained. But other than that, there wasn't a lot. It was a bit sedate, I think, for a show aimed at children. And as I said, there was lots that I enjoyed. The puppets were incredible in it. I felt sorry for the guy playing Winnie the Pooh because he had to crouch, but then I had an issue with some of the accents, I guess, the voices, in that they were trying to be like the Disney characters but not really managing it. So the guy playing Tigger, and there was a guy that played a few characters. He did Eel, he did Rabbit, I think he did Owl as well. He was really good. But Winnie the Pooh, Piglet, they were a little, as I said, as a person that likes Disney, they weren't quite the Disney. And if they weren't trying to emulate that would have been fine, but you could tell they were, and it didn't quite work. So I'm glad I've seen it. It's very sweet. The staging and the puppets and things like that were really good, but not quite the viewing experience I probably would have liked for it. And I'm not sure it quite fits the demographic that it's actually pitching itself for. And then coming in at number 6 is the one I saw fairly recently. I mentioned it in the bonfire video, and that is Treason the Musical. This is a musical based on Guy Fawkes. It's trying to pitch itself as the British Hamilton, and you can definitely see elements of the costuming, the choreography and that kind of stuff that do come from Hamilton. But the reason it's in at number 6 is it just has a very weird narrative style to it, and it made it slightly difficult to follow. Now, I kind of get what they were trying to do, and on the car journey home with Pete, I was trying to explain what I thought they were trying to do, but I don't think it worked. So we're looking at Guy Fawkes, who, if you are familiar with British history, whatever, Bonfire Night, he appears to be the pivotal person in it, in that story, which is not actually the case. He's just a hired gun, essentially. And that's what they were trying to put across in this, that actually there's this whole group of people that were far more involved than Guy Fawkes himself. But there was this whole sort of flashback bit, and then he was then in the story, and then he has this monologue at the end, and I didn't know whether that was him from the flashbacks, like now, because it's all about you only know of me on one night, I want you to know my story. But I don't know whether his monologue at the end was Guy Fawkes at the time or Guy Fawkes now. And there was just a lot of it that was confusing, is the best way of putting it. And it was quite long. Pretty much all of these shows, 5 of the 7 I saw at the Lyceum in Sheffield, and this was definitely the longest show. It was the one that started earlier, which threw me because every show that I've pretty much seen there has started at 7:45. This one didn't. This was 7:15. So it's quite long. It's a bit slow in patches. There's a very weird narrative style, and I do think they expect people to come into the show with a semblance of knowledge of what's going on in that period of history, which quite frankly, no, not really. I mean, I knew a little bit, but I think the show itself doesn't explain that very well for someone coming in fresh who may not know a lot about it, which Hamilton probably does do for, say, a British person like me watching it. I know what's going on in that show, even though I don't know the American history of it. Whereas I'm not sure the same would be, it would be the same for Treason, say if an American person came in to watch that. The reason I put it above Winnie the Pooh though is the vocal performance in that was possibly one of the best ones I've seen, certainly one of the best ones I've seen this year. Like, there's some big songs and some big vocals, and it was really good. Like, I enjoyed that aspect of it immensely. I'm not a big fan of that sort of Hamilton staging where they fling chairs about and stuff, so I could have done without that. But those vocals were great, so that's why it's in at number 6. Moving on to number 5, and this is the show I saw most recently. I saw it as I'm recording on Saturday, I'm recording on Monday. It's one that I didn't film, I wasn't filming that weekend, and we went to see And Then There Were None, which is an Agatha Christie book. So just saying it's an Agatha Christie, you kind of understand the sort of template that we're going to be working to for this murder mystery. I have read the book previously, and it is my favourite of the 2, 3 Agatha Christie's I've read, so I've not had a lot of exposure, but it's definitely my favourite one. And I remembered most of it except for, you know, the crucial bit of who done it. So that was useful, because then it was still a bit of a surprise for me. So this is based on a remote island, and one by one the participants there are being killed off. And the reason it's in at number 5 for me, and it's possibly just because it's an Agatha Christie and that's just the way they go, the first half was a little slow to get going. There's 10 people on this island, and you have to get to know all of them. They're all accused of murdering someone or a group of people, and you have to try and remember what person is linked to what murder, and they're trying telling you the stories, and it's a lot to get your head around in the first half. Again, I went with Pete and his parents, and I think all three of them may have had an extended blink or two during that first half. I didn't. I was being kicked by my child during the time, so I was awake, although getting a little bit uncomfortable. So yeah, this is very much a show of two halves, because then you come into the Act 2, the second half of the show, and it really ramps up. The death scenes are a lot more graphic, which is something I had mentioned to Pete in the first act, is that they did a lot of the murder was off stage, and I was like, surely we could have a bit more of that on stage. I'm not sure if they then took it a bit too far. There is a hanging at one point, and that went on for a while, and it was very graphic, and if you'd had some sort of experience of that, that would probably have been very triggering. Obviously, you're coming to a murder mystery, you know there's gonna be murder, but you probably don't expect to witness that quite so much in detail as what we did. I thought all of the actors gave a very decent performance. I wouldn't say there was anyone that particularly stood out. It can get a little bit monotony, but that might just be the dialogue and the way it's written and the time period and the style and the yada yada yada. So all in all, it was good. It very much fits the top half of the lower bracket, if that makes sense. So I enjoyed it, and it's one that I probably never would have seen because it would never have come to London. So this is why, being in a local theatre now, you get to see some very different shows than ones that potentially I would have seen if I'd stuck to London and the West End. So we're coming in to the top 4, and these are the sort of more standout shows of the year. So in at number 4 is Life of Pi. Now there is a vlog on that, and we did give some extensive thoughts on that show. It's definitely my favourite play that I've seen this year, which is only 2, so it doesn't have a lot to compare itself to. And obviously I went in having seen the film and knowing the story. I've read the book as well, so it was interesting for me to see the comparisons between the 3 mediums. Again, the puppets in it were really, really impressive. I've realised I quite like a puppet show, in the fact that a show has puppets in, not like Punch and Judy or something like that. All of that was impressive. I think we said it in our review in that video that the guy playing Pi Patel, you really have to have a strong actor and a real charismatic actor in that role, because they don't really leave the stage. They have to hold the whole show together. Essentially it's just them and these puppets for most of it, which would be tricky and could be done very badly, but we were very lucky in that we had a very good actor playing Pi. Made more impressive that it was his acting debut. This was his first job. Pretty sure Sheffield was one of the first stops on the tour, if not the first stop on the tour, so he hadn't had that many shows under his belt either. So yeah, well done, well staged, like the puppets. Really impressed by the actor playing Pi Patel for that one, and that's why it came in at number 4. So the top 3 are all musicals. The third one is Sister Act, which I saw back at Easter with my brother when he came up to Sheffield. We have wanted to see Sister Act for quite some time. We liked the film as kids. We used to watch it, not often, but we always enjoyed it when we did. We tried to get tickets when it was at the Hammersmith Apollo, I think, with potentially Whoopi Goldberg in the Dolores role, but we couldn't, and the ones that were left over were really expensive, so we never got to see it. So when I saw it was coming to Sheffield, I grabbed some for my brother's Christmas present. It also gave him an excuse to come up and stay in my house for the first time, so that was good. Sister Act felt like a very standard adaptation of a film to musical. They're quite common, and they're becoming increasingly common if you look at the workshops and stuff that are going on at the moment. Certainly that sort of 90s, early 2000s films seem to be being churned out left, right and centre, which I both love, because a lot of the films are ones I really like, but also would quite like something kind of new and different. But the reason Sister Act is at number 3, as I said, it's got some catchy songs. Obviously it's about the singing nuns, but they're not really ones that were used in the film. And the Goon song in particular was my favourite, because it was sort of doo-woppy about how they're gonna catch her and kill her, and it made me laugh immensely. We had a good cast. My brother thought it was a little bit wrong that the love interest was probably considerably older than our person playing Dolores, but I didn't mind it because he is in Tracy Beaker, which is obviously a show I watched as a kid, and you might be able to see, oh not quite, there's a few Jacqueline Wilson here, but there's a whole lot of Jacqueline Wilson. I read a lot of her, so having the guy that was in Tracy Beaker was pretty cool to me. So that's why it had to come above Winnie the Pooh and Treason, because it had everything that I wanted in a musical. It was fun, it was vibrant, it had some good songs, some good choreography, and a story to it that I could follow. So yeah, number 3 for Sister Act. And then we come into number 1 and 2, which I actually saw in the same weekend when I went down to London, so I will link that vlog for you. And they were actually the first shows I saw this year, so I started on a high and just sort of crept down, which is a shame. And I also feel a bit bad that both of these are in London and not from my local theatre and not a touring production. But that is just the way the cookie has crumbled in my opinions of the shows. To be fair, the show at number 2 and the show at number 3, so Sister Act, and at number 2 is the Great British Bake Off musical, could have been either way, to be honest. But the reason that the Bake Off musical comes in at number 2 is just because it has that newness about it. Yes, it is based on the Bake Off, which is a show, again, if you've seen my vlogs, you know I watch it fairly religiously. So there was something so appealing about a musical based on a baking show that I loved, and I was so... I knew it would work, but I didn't know how they would do it and how they would intertwine an actual narrative in it, which I think they did well, and I do hope it has a life. I now have listened to the music recently again, and the songs are just fun. There's a song about getting a handshake. They sing a song to the theme tune of the Bake Off. You have all the contestants with their sort of quirks that they then pick up on in each thing. There are a few storylines, the Italian woman, for example, that I'm not sure quite worked. I mean, her storyline was all about that she couldn't have a baby and that she had fertility issues, and then she had a song about having a bun in the oven, which possibly not ideal. But like Sister Act, it was fun, it was vibrant, there are lots of moments in it that made me laugh, and yeah, just generally a feel-good musical with songs that I enjoyed, performances that I thought were good. It had the benefit that there were some known people, or at least known people to me. So I follow Scott Page on social media. He played Jim, I think was the name, who was one of the hosts, and I've always enjoyed his performance. I've seen him in 3 things now and have always enjoyed his work. I can't remember who the guy playing Paul Hollywood is, but he's been in a lot of musicals. He's a very seasoned actor and knew how to make the most out of his things. Sadly, our Prue Leaf, she wasn't called Prue Leaf in the show, but sadly our Prue Leaf has, since that show, actually passed away, and she was doing that without most people knowing, with cancer. So again, impressive, if not bittersweet and sad. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed the show. I hope it does have a life. Again, as I said about Sister Act, it does seem like there's a lot of film adaptations to musicals at the moment, and this felt like a newer idea, although it is still based on a TV show. That makes sense? Which means if you have been following my videos and you are eagle-eyed and know what shows I've been, you'll know what's at number 1. But my favourite show of the year, and it was a very, very easy choice, was Newsies. So again, in that weekend that I saw Bake Off, on the following day me and my brother went up to Wembley, I think it's the Troubadour Theatre, and we saw Newsies. On a bit of a whim, my brother had booked something else for us. I think it was an immersive Alice in Wonderland thing, which turned out not to be ready the weekend that I was coming up, and he was like, what do you want to do? I was like, well, I'd quite like to see Newsies if there's tickets and they're not too expensive, so that's why we ended up there. It was sort of a whim. And Newsies is fairly famous. I watched in lockdown the version on Disney Plus. I did a sort of review on my sofa musical theatre thing, which again I'll link if you're interested. So I knew the show and I knew some of the songs, but the reason it's my favourite show of this year is not really because of that, it's the viewing experience that we had. So the Troubadour is kind of in the round. You've got some shorter seating either side of the stage and then banked seating that way. And we were lucky to be on one of the sides. We were like a stone's throw from the stage, which meant that we could see everything. And the cast, they went all around us, they were flying, they were so many stunts and acrobatics and all of that kind of stuff. Just made the viewing experience really good. I'm not a huge fan of big dance breaks and things like that, which Newsies does have, but because we were so close and we could see, I guess, the effort that was being put in and just the skill that was needed to do all of these dance numbers and stuff, it just made the show so awe-inspiring to watch. I came out of the show and was saying to my brother how I now felt worn out just watching them. It also helps that it has a banging soundtrack. I listen to it quite often. Seize the Day and King of the World and all of that are real good musical theatre songs. And as I said, just a really talented young cast of actors, dancers and everything in between, it felt like. So there was no debating which was going to be my favourite show of the year. And yeah, I'm so glad I did get to see it. I mean, I would never have known what I missed out on, but man, I would have missed out if I didn't get to see that one. So there you go. There is a rundown of the 7 shows that I've seen, from my least favourite to my favourite, but as I said at the beginning, I enjoyed them all. I love going to the theatre. It's one of the biggest things that I can pull joy from, and I'm just very lucky that I've been able to go quite so regularly. Obviously that might change, what with the impending life change that's coming next year, but I already have a couple of things booked up, so we'll see. It might not be 7, but we'll get to some stuff. I've also seen some stuff in 2025 that's coming to Sheffield that I really want to see as well, so I'm keeping an eye. And the theatre won't be going from this channel. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments about the shows I've talked about, or if there is something that you think I must go and see, let me know in the comments below. I'd be really interested in the latter point actually, because there's loads of shows I've not seen. So, I mean, there's lots of shows I have seen, but there's loads of shows I haven't seen that I'd like to as well. If you are interested in theatre trips and things like that, as I said, they're going to be more towards the end of 2024 probably than the beginning part, because, you know, the baby. But click that subscribe button, there will be some, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.